We begin with breaking news from Alberta. CBC News has learned Premier Danielle Smith pressured the Attorney General and his office to intervene in COVID-related court cases. Multiple sources familiar with the interaction say the Premier's office has repeatedly contacted the Justice Minister's office in an attempt to influence cases. The CBC's Elise Von Shield joins me now from Calgary. Elise, walk us through your new reporting.
Yeah, so we were able to speak to people who were familiar with basically months of this going on, where the Premier would contact the Attorney General's office, inquiring about certain cases, specifically pandemic-related charges. But not only inquire, these people who we spoke to said that it went as far as to constitute pressure, that there was an expectation or an understanding communicated from the Premier to the Justice Minister's office that she wished for these pandemic-related charges, these COVID violations, to go away. And so the people who we spoke to who were familiar with what went on, with what had been said and spoken about, called it inappropriate. They called it constant and consistent pressure, and that was what the Attorney General was dealing with, and that in response to that, that his office was pushing back and saying, you know, I'm not sure that that's appropriate. I'm not sure what we can do here. So this was going on for a few months, ramped up in the last little bit, and had to do with a specific case as well, one of a pastor who was facing some criminal charges related to his participation in events surrounding the Coutts border blockade. So this particular case was one that, according to the sources that we spoke to, was one that Premier Smith wanted dealt with. She wanted it to go away. And there's an interesting connection, or a paper trail here, is that there had been public pressure from people who did not support pandemic measures, as well as from Rebel News founder Ezra Levant, who had sent a letter to the Premier's office specifically mentioning this case as well as other COVID cases, and essentially saying what he wanted her to do and offering her advice as to how she could get her Attorney General to step in here and get these charges to be dismissed or withdrawn. And so we were able to see a copy of this email that we then know was forwarded on to the Attorney General, so that there's little trails that we can follow here as to how exactly those conversations made their way to the Attorney General, and exactly what he was up against, which, as we now know, people who are familiar with what happened are calling inappropriate pressure from the Premier.
Elise, how has the Premier responded?
She has made some public statements to the effect that she did speak with her Justice Minister and with his Deputy Attorney General about these matters. We know that she's come out and said that. What we didn't know before was, of course, the nature and how the office receiving that conversation had characterized it. So in response, the Premier said, you know, I have been clear that I have had these conversations. When I came into office, I wanted to take a look at what might be done legally to potentially grant amnesty to people with COVID-related offenses. In the end, she ended up dropping that promise and said it wasn't possible. But she said, look, everything that I have done here has gone through the appropriate channels and has been above board. She also harkened back in a later statement, a separate statement also issued today, talked about some reporting that we had done last week, where we had been told that someone in her office had contacted Crown prosecutors related to Coutts border blockade criminal charges, and she's now calling that story defamatory. So there's a couple of new things from her office here as it comes to questions that swirl about the appropriateness of her interactions with people dealing with, both her Attorney General and Crown prosecutors, dealing with these COVID-related charges. Katie.
Elise Von Shield, we will continue to follow this breaking and developing story. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks.